This is Dan from Tiny Home Builders, and today's Ask Dan question comes from Bree in Nashville, Tennessee, and her question is, how do I get utilities to my tiny house? This is another really common question that we get, which is understandable because if you have a house, you expect to have certain things like power, water, and sewer. So how are you going to get these, especially if you're parking it in your backyard or something? You don't already have those things there, so what's that process? Well, it's different depending on if your house is going to be on-grid or off-grid. And off-grid is when your house is basically out of range of services, or perhaps it's within range, you just don't have services that you can tap into. So for instance, on-grid would be if you have city water where you can get your water from, but if you're out in the middle of the woods where there's no city water line running through, then you would be off-grid. You have to get your water from some service or some way that's not going to be provided to you. So let's start with on-grid because that's the easiest. And an example of an on-grid situation is if you park the tiny house in your backyard. You're right next to a host house where you can get your services from. So all of those utilities are an option for your tiny house. And that's normally what the situation is for most people. Most people are going to be on-grid. And so when you're on-grid, it's just like an RV. It's just like if you parked an RV in your backyard where you would get your water from the house. You could get it from something as simple as a faucet that's on the outside of the house. You would use a white RV hose, and the RV hoses are white because if you've ever had a drink out of a garden hose, you know that it has a pretty undesirable taste, and the white hoses don't have that. So you could do something as simple as having a white RV hose for your water, for your power, something as simple as an extension cord, and then for the sewer, then that gets a little bit more complicated. You have to actually tie into the existing sewer system. That's not a pipe that you can just run across the ground, across the top of the ground. And in that case, what we normally do is we have a plumber come out, and the plumber will tie into an existing sewer system. We do everything else ourselves, but the sewer is something that it's money well spent if you have someone else do that. So a plumber typically for us costs about $150 to come in, bury, trench out where the piping is going to go, and then tie into the existing system. So if you wanted something a little bit more permanent, you can, in addition to burying the plumbing, in addition to burying the waste pipe, you can bury the power cord that goes out to your house. You can also bury the water line that goes out. Now these, you wouldn't want to be burying the hose, you wouldn't want to be burying an extension cord. They have special materials that are specifically meant to be buried to run out. And in that case, you would have it more like an RV plot where, when you pull into a campsite, you're on an RV plot and there's a plug right there for plugging in your house and plugging in your water, tying in your water. Now you can also, if you bury these cables and run them out to your house, you can also permanently tie them into your house where the power cord would come right into your breaker box that's on your house. But we still recommend having that small amount of disconnectable utilities between the part that you've buried and run out to your house and your actual house. Having a small extension cord, having a small RV hose, it's nice to be able to easily disconnect the house if you need to. For code inspection purposes, it's nice to be able to show that your house can be disconnected. If a code enforcement officer comes out and sees that your house is permanently wired into your house, they may treat your house differently. So anyways, it's, all of these things are very easy. If you've built your house, it's going to be very easy to do the plumbing running out underground. It's going to be very easy to do the electrical coming out. You may want to have an electrician that ties it into your house, since that would be a little bit more involved than just having an extension cord. But all of these things are pretty inexpensive and easily done. When your house is off-grid, the solution is a little bit more difficult because you can't just rely on someone else providing these services to you. So if you have the option to be on-grid, I definitely recommend that. It's going to make your life easier. But if you don't have the option for off-grid, you still do have choices. So for electricity, people normally choose either a solar or a wind-based solar or power system, an off-grid power system. That costs a little bit more money. It requires some maintenance, but again, it's definitely doable. So you'd want to look into that. We have resources on our website that can point you to some people that can help you with that. For water, people will generally have either a rainwater collection system or they'll actually bring water in. There'll be places where they can go and fill up tanks and then bring them back to their house. again, that's something that you wouldn't have to worry about if you were on grid. A note for rainwater collection is that a tiny house typically isn't large enough. The area of the roof of a tiny house, without having some kind of accessory dwelling or some other structure out that can collect rainwater as well, the roof of a tiny house typically isn't big enough to supply enough water for a single person year round. So we have in the second edition of the Tiny House Design and Construction Guide, we have a formula that you can plug in the size of your house and determine how much water how many gallons you'd get, and then you'd go off and calculate how many gallons you would use, and do a comparison on a month by month basis to see if you're going to be able to collect enough water. So, but again, more than likely, you're not going to be able to collect enough. So, so you'll want to have some kind of supplemental source, being able to, on those dry months, being able to go someplace and get water if need be. And then for sewer, more than likely the option that you're going to go there is, for the black water, a composting toilet, and for the gray water, probably like a French drain, someplace where it drains to a flower bed. I did another Ask Dan that talks all about toilets, so I won't get into that here. But again, there's definitely options for off-grid living. It's just not as common and not quite as easy, and usually costs a little bit more money. So so not the best of anything. But anyways, so that's it. That's how you get utilities to your tiny house. Well, thank you, Bree. Thank you for the great question. We'll be sending you your free copy of the Tiny House Design and Construction Guide since your question was selected. If you guys out there have a question for me, please don't hesitate to send it to askdan@tinyhomebuilders.com, and I look forward to hearing from you guys.